And before I reveal all of our guests and hosts today, I just have to point out we've been really busy looking at a variety of things that we all have on each other's desks. And hello, everybody. It is Pseudo. Welcome to the Datamine. It is Thursday here. It is the 21st of August. It is 1 p.m., which means we have some amazing things. It's literally known as the Datamine. And I am joined by two of our regular hosts, and we have a very special guest who is going to go by a variety of names, and we have a lot of things to cover today. So let's start off first by saying hello to Adam, a.k.a. Andy, a.k.a. DJ Arcus.
Hello.
And we say hello to Chris, a.k.a. Spiky, a.k.a. 19 Stone Ninja member.
And bid the dog on the chat.
Yeah,
hello,
the dog
everyone.
In the chat. Yes. We are joined by he who is known as LaunchableSocks. However, you may call him Joost. He is from Liquid Flower. It is a development company that has come out with a game known as Cube-1. And the game he has had a direct impact on because he did the music for it. And it is one of those soundtracks that just sort of stood out to me, and I just went, whoa. So he has been kind enough to join us. So, of course, what are we talking about today, folks, but sound and music and game dev. But before we do that, we have some announcements to make. To start off with, I made mention, yes, folks, we are going to be giving away another pair of Gunner glasses. The reason for this is our previous winner of those awesome Gunner Interceptor orange glasses said, could you do me a favor, please? Could you kind of like pass on those glasses to somebody else? And I just went, and I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So we're going to be giving away a pair.
Did they say why?
Yes, they did.
He had eyes?
Pure altruism.
It's it is. So Eduardo, hearts to you, sweetheart, because you're the one who had won, and yet in the end, guess what? You have given him back for us to give things to you. And yes, there is a giant Lego face in his camera, and he loves Lego.
Lego man likes you.
It's full of Lego. It's a Lego storage container.
Lego-ception.
Yes, I'm saying it's like Lego-ception. They don't do a medium-sized one, so you could have a head in the head.
Yes. So, just so you are aware, at some point today, I will let you guys know how it is you can enter to get your hands on a pair of those Orange Intercepts Gunner glasses. And yeah, you are pretty much going to want to listen for that one, because those things are so awesome. Another thing, we also have been kind enough, our guest has brought with him codes to give away for people to use in Steam to get their hands on Cube-1, the game that he wrote the music for. And we will be giving those out periodically to some random people throughout the stream. And that pretty much covers our giveaways. Now for the big news. If you're an independent developer, how many of you are independent developers here? Okay. If you're an independent developer and you are interested in learning how to make, at least in the United Kingdom, the tax break system work best for you, Yuki is putting on, along with Game Republic, a free talk next Tuesday in Leeds. And it is an amazing chat. It's all about how to make the most out of the game tax relief credits that are available here in the United Kingdom. And if you're interested in that, the link will be coming up in just a few moments for you. Now, also,
if you're not interested, you should be. If you are paying almost any tax at all, you're doing it wrong. You should be paying so little tax as a corporation. If you're an indie dev, don't think to yourself, I won't be able to make. If you make like £10,000, you do not want to see £5,000 of that go to the tax man. Definitely make sure you do this. It's really important.
It is. And this is one of the things that Yuki is known for, is trying to get the word out about everything from tax breaks to putting people in touch with each other to try to build games, and also offering a whole bunch of stuff like game jams. They do amazing things there. But as a side note, if you are a member of Yuki and you are a full member of Yuki, you actually can nominate to be a part of the board for Yuki, which means you can help influence the future of Yuki and independent game development and the things that they focus on. So if you're an independent game developer and you are really interested in being a part of this and you are a full member of Yuki, make certain that you check out this post. This came from Jo. We had her on the Datamine. She is the CEO of Yuki. She is hysterical. She loves cats. And this particular post is known as Nom Nom Nominate Yourself, and it's got a great picture of a cat in it. So if nothing else, go view the cat, because the cat is amazing. So,
Aww.
Yes.
He's wearing a tie. It's like business kitty.
It is. Now, what I am going to also do is I'm now going to shut up and let Chris talk.
About what?
Chris
About
is
my
going
bits.
to tell us about the 2 things you're doing
Yeah.
for the Unity group and also the new show that you've got going on. And I know that Arcus has a show that he's going to talk a little bit about, and then we're just going to shut up and talk to Launchable.
I will be as quick as I possibly can because this isn't about me, this is about sound. So I am talking next Thursday at the Manchester Unity User Group. I'm going to be doing a similar talk to what I did on the first show that I was on for MMOBuff about character parkour, but I'm going to go into a bit more detail, and I might even, if I have time, and I should do, to write some specific code for it and show that at the actual talk. It's only a small Unity user group. I think there was only about 20 people there last time, but it's a great gathering and everyone goes out for a drink afterwards, so get yourself down there next Thursday at 7 o'clock, and it's at Mad Lab in Manchester, I believe. That's where the last one was. I think I'm presuming the next one is. Also, I am running another Twitch show. We call it Resonance Arcade, and it's a gaming podcast. Basically, it's just a load of friends talking about games, but we're trying to get audience involved and get kind of some participation going. So that's 6:30 on Wednesdays. Yesterday's show has just been uploaded to YouTube. I'll post the link in chat later. So thanks for that, Josie.
Hey, my pleasure. I'm all for supporting all of us, and I know that you, Adam, are very heavily involved in streaming. Every time I turn around, DJ Arcus is now streaming. DJ Arcus is now streaming. So, you want to tell me what you do?
I do regular and very irregular game dev streams. I stream a whole variety of commercial games as well. But I mean, last Saturday I spent streaming. I was developing a Sidewinder missile simulation code. The other day I was streaming a multiplayer dev test. I'm always doing game dev related streams. So if you want to learn to program, for God's sake, don't follow me. But if you'd like to see me absolutely make a disaster of code, no, you should have seen the code. I spent ages, like an hour watching my missiles do this, and I went, oh, I'm applying it in world space, not relative space, things like that. And but it's always an exciting journey watching me screw up.
People tend to appreciate that, though. In my experience, because I'm quite amateur in comparison when it comes to game dev, people tend to appreciate you showing your journey, if you know what I mean, even if you don't know what you're doing.
They like to see you make the mistakes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I haven't had any negative criticism from my streams, and unfortunately, because I haven't done it for so long now, whenever I do run a stream, nobody watches me at all. Like literally 1 or 0 followers. So even though I've got like 50 odd subscribers, no one tends to come along, and I don't know why that is. It's just kind of got out of it.
Well, part of it is regularity.
Yeah.
There needs to be something regular. Having the occasional irregularity is one of those things, but if you're going to put on a show, it should be regular. For which I now apologize for missing last week. In case you can't tell, when I smile, this side of my face is kind of frozen. I have a very swollen jaw still, so, yeah.
Yeah, we all know it's Botox. Come on.
Oh, yes. It's completely Botox. I just woke up one day and decided I needed to look young. I was sick of looking
And there
like
you are.
You look young.
Nothing ever changes with you guys. I'm always trolled.
We were being the correct response is yeah, thank you. That's a very nice thing for you to say. Not you're being mean. You're being nice, yeah.
Never said anything nice again.
So untrue, so unfair. But yes, let's move in to talking about sound when it comes to games. Now, one of the things about the Datamine is that it's not just about the people who sit there and do the coding, like, for example, relative space versus game space, or the people who sit there and build the parkour. Part of the game experience is the sound in the game itself, which is why we have, or at least I consider myself incredibly blessed to have Joost with us, because he has done a complete soundtrack, and it reminds me, for those of you who are old school enough to remember, it sort of reminds me a little bit of Vangelis and a little bit of sort of the soundscape you get for Blade Runner in a way. Even though it's not the same, and someone's alarm just went off. Didn't we just go over this?
Sorry. My doorbell, sorry.
What? Wait, hold on. Where's your front door? Oh, hold on.
Unplug now.
My troll in my trapdoor is ringing. Hold on a moment.
I need to feed my secret family in my basement.
Now we know all about that, Chris. See?
I don't even need to give an explanation
Doorbell.
to you guys, do I? You come up with your own little fantasy world. It's brilliant.
Now I want to build a game about what is underneath, Chris's office door.
Make it an Oculus
Lots of
game.
beard hair.
I'm making
That's
an
what's underneath
Oculus
my
game.
desk.
Mm-hmm. But yes, so we're talking about sound and stuff. So one of the first things I want to do for you, Joost, is I want to ask you a question.
All right.
I would like for you to take some time and just explain to people how you got into music and then how you got into doing game development or game music, because they don't always cross paths, as the case may be.
Yeah, that's true. Wow, that's as detailed a story as you want it. Because how does one start making music? You're a kid. My dad had a guitar somewhere lying around in the attic or something, and it had 3 strings on it. And I think that's where I started making music. I touched it, and it was like a toy at the time. It wasn't really an instrument; it was like a toy.
Wait,
so
is that a guitar that's supposed to have 3 strings, or is it like a broken guitar?
No, it's just a really old guitar.
Okay.
It was just a messed up old guitar. He used to play it as when he was still studying, and it was just messed up and old. And I think my brother found it, and then we started just playing around with it. And I was just really excited that I could just press finger here, and then you can influence the tone. That's interesting. I think that's kind of how it started. And then when my dad saw me and my brother play with it, he restringed it, and my brother started playing it, not me at first. Anyway, long story short, that kind of snowballed, and I started playing guitar a little bit more. I never really intended to. I never really picked up, I never decided, I'm going to learn how to play guitar or anything like that. It just kind of happened to me, I guess, if that makes sense. And that snowballed into, eventually wanting to play into bands when I kind of turned 16 or something. Started talking to friends last week, because I'm 17 now. So that's evolved into bands. I started playing in bands, and on the side there, one of the friends I made, when I started making music and started trying to find people to play in bands with me, we talked about this a little bit pre-show. I started making some songs with him as a joke. It started with Windows Sound Recorder or something, which is this free program where you can record up to 60 seconds of sound or something. Or maybe even 30 seconds.
Oh yeah.
Really, yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. So we wrote joke songs. Just basically click record and then just mashed on the guitar and gave them silly names, and send it to each other. Send those to each other as jokes, literally as jokes. They weren't supposed to be actual songs. They were just supposed to be audible jokes. And that kind of grew more and more, and we started using Fruity Loops at first, and then that kind of evolved into something a little more serious until eventually. I didn't get into gaming until I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, I'd always been interested in it. Aren't we all?
Did you have any sort of education with music? Because you said about talking about bands and things. Were you ever did you do any formal training of any sort?
No. I did have guitar lessons for a couple of years, but that was actually I had to stop doing that because I was studying at the time. I'm a master's student in philosophy, and just took up too much of my time, and eventually I moved to Finland to work on this game, so I had to quit that. But I think I had guitar lessons for about 3 or 4 years, but that was way after it was kind of more.
You'd already learned it.
Sorry?
You'd already learned guitar by then, though. Really, you were just refining your theory. Yeah.
It's I sucked at theory, the theory part of it, because I just kind of taught myself, and I wanted to get a little bit more deeper into it and play things like jazz standards and stuff like that. So that's why I had guitar lessons.
The good old 3-4-5 or 5-4-3 or whatever the heck it's called, the 5-4-1. It's
compound time signatures.
No, those aren't time signatures. It's the mechanic of fretting. Yeah, it's actually a blues thing.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I still suck at that, but I'm a little bit less than before. And so I eventually got into gaming because through animations, really, because I had 6 months of free time because I graduated my bachelor's degree halfway through the year, and I was like, okay, so I didn't want to go and do my master's right after, so I had 6 months of spare time, and I had a friend who did animations, and he said, well, if you want to, we can kind of work together a little bit sometime, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great plan. And he actually had clients, like people who paid him to do that. I didn't realize that at the time. And so when I went and visited him, he said, like, yeah, if you want to do this, you have to go and like set up your own one-man company because, you know, I'm gonna have to pay you and stuff. And I was like, whoa, this is all so much more serious than I thought it was gonna be. But I was like, okay, I've got nothing better to do, so I did that. And then I did, I think, one job for him at one point, but he doesn't get that many, so I still had kind of nothing really to do. But now I have my own company, so it's like, what am I gonna do now? I just kind of went on the internet and I looked for things to do, and I started at games because kind of really secretly that's what I've always been wanting to do ever since I started making music. So I just found this project on the independent game source. It was the first Cuba. It was just a thread with the developer saying we need music, and I was like, I'm gonna do that. At first he didn't respond, but it turned out he didn't get my message, so I emailed him, and then he was like, oh yeah, like, you're hired, because he listened to my music, and, well, hired, I'd say hired, but, like, yeah, you can do it.
At least they didn't ask you to do it for free, though. Because
yes.
you get that a lot as a musician.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you do get that so much. So much. And not just in games, everywhere. You know, I've been in a band for 16
exposure
years.
if you do it for free, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go, yeah. We've all heard that. I mean, it goes
come
for
on.
musicians.
Which one of you hasn't heard but it's, you know, you're a freelancer, so therefore it's free, right?
Well, I haven't heard that, I'll be honest, to be fair. That's why I tout myself as a contractor or a self-employed person. That'll do.
Yeah, we've all heard it. We've all heard it. Yeah, and I mean it goes for music. It goes for artists too. I think I heard that a lot. I don't know about programmers though. But
oh yeah. Can you just look at this? Yeah, that's fine. It's just a little thing. I just want this app to organize all of these millions of things and have camera and integration. It won't take you long, will me? No, I'm not going away.
Precisely. Yeah.
It'll make some money in the future. Yeah, no.
Yeah, but at this point I had nothing to do, and I really wanted to do this game because it looked really cool, and he gave some examples of inspirations for the music, among which was Mirror's Edge soundtrack and some bands that he posted, and it sounded really like something I wanted to do, so I just did it. And it was a small game. It was a student project. It was his graduation project, so he was like, I'm going to put it up for free. So I was like, yeah, sounds great. We did that. It was great. That was Cuba. That was the first Cuba, of which Cuba -1 is a prequel, and it got a little bit of attention for. It was just a small game. I think it was 4 or 5 levels. You could play through it in about 5 minutes if you know what you're doing. But it got a little bit of attention. We put it up on Desura. It got downloaded, I think, like 10,000 times or something. It was pretty nice, and I think Rock Paper Shotgun wrote about it, and IndieGames.com, and we were like, oh wow, that's way more attention than we thought. And then we decided to make another one, and a bigger one, a full-blown game this time, and they asked me to do all the music and all the sound for it. So I convinced, because I was doing my master's degree in philosophy at the time, and I convinced the philosophy faculty that this was a good idea to send me to Finland to live there for a while and have it count as a philosophical internship. Which I did.
That's a nice blag.
Right? Yeah. So I moved to Finland and I made that game, and here I am.
And so the game's out?
The game is out.
So
Yes.
where is the game out?
The game
Where
is
can one
available.
find
You can get it in Steam. And what do you know? I have codes to give away for this. Oh my goodness. Holy cow. At some point I'll give them away. But yes, you can get this in Steam. In fact,
it's out on Steam. We released the 15th of May, which is already quite a while ago, actually.
Your story's kind of a longer version of my musical history. I've ran a recording studio and was in bands myself, but I never went into games. I decided to do the programming side of that as a professional, in a professional capacity, and then I've used that to get into games. So yeah, it's quite your story's similar. I didn't have any formal teaching or anything like that. I did do a few lessons. I sucked at the theory, but I wanted to get better at it. That's why I did the lessons. And yeah, and it kind of snowballed from there. And now I just don't really want anything to do with bands or recording studios or anything because I've had enough of it.
He
I
says
will
with
eventually
the most
reuse
awesome
that
mic
stuff.
in the world sitting in front of him.
I'm using
and
that for my own
compressor that
my own
needs
ends.
to warm up every single time he turns it on.
Yes.
Wait, you've got a valve compressor.
I have a valve
microphone.
compressor, and it makes my voice lovely, smooth, and soft. Or rather, you can hear every grunt and gurgle that comes from me and every creak of my chair.
You're actually being asked a question, Joost. Did you guys go through Greenlight on Steam?
No, we didn't. We teamed up with Digital Tribe halfway through development, or actually not halfway, pretty early in development, who are a small indie publisher, and they had some contacts with Valve, and they arranged for us to get, like, we built a prototype, first for conversion, and they presented that to Steam, and that's kind of how we got in.
The game is called
I've seen this game before.
-1, by the way. It's known as -1 because it is a prequel to Cube. And
Shouldn't it be a 0 then? Because your first, like a film is like, Terminator. Then you have Terminator 2, so you should have Terminator 0. Like, this is the pre-sequel. You've got room for another game in the middle.
That's what they did it for.
So for a post
open-ended. It's like
You've just revealed their marketing tactics for the next 10 years.
Because Borderlands did the same thing. They did Borderlands 1, Borderlands 2, and then they're like, we don't know what to call the next one, so they're calling it Borderlands the pre-sequel, which everybody else would have called a prequel. So
it's confusing, actually, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And in fact, one of the things we're going to do right now is we are going to go ahead and we will give away one of the keys that we have for this game on Steam. I am jealous because this game looks exceptional. It's in my list. I do bulk buying from Steam because I play so many games and I do so many things I want to make sure I have time for. This is in my bulk update for my next thing. So you guys are lucky. You're getting your hands on something I haven't even had a chance to play yet, and I'm jealous because I really want to play this game. It's a puzzle game. It's right up my alley. I love
It looks
puzzles.
really cool, actually.
Yes. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of time, and I'm going to put the name of the game, and that's the keyword that I am looking for people to type out for me. Just put it into the chat. It's very simple. You're put into the actual competition. If you put it in twice, you'll be removed from the competition. It's that simple.
What happens if you put it in 3 times? Does it go back in again?
No, you don't get the option.
Okay.
You do not get the option at all.
Just checking. Curious how it works.
So,
did you do the sound effects and the music, or did you just do the music for it?
All the sound effects, all the music, everything that you hear.
How did you find...
So give us some stats. Like, how many bits of music, how many sound effects, how long's the music? Tell us. How much did you do? How much work did you actually do?
I did actually. How much work did I actually do? Oh wow.
None.
I kind of sat around, waited for it to happen. No, it's actually a pretty long soundtrack. I put it all in one file at one point, or I measured how long it was. I think it's the music is in total 1 hour and 40 minutes, something like that. So that's the music, and I have no idea how much sound is in there, how many clips are in there, but a lot. It's also, I mean, it was the first time I'd ever done that. I mean, I'd done sound design for animations as well, but I'd never done sound for a game before. So there was a lot of trial and error. For example, one of the first things I thought about doing was, okay, so we need footsteps. And I had no idea how I would do footsteps. So I just kind of walked around the office first with a microphone next to my feet and see if that works. And then, it doesn't really kind of work. And then first I had to talk to the programmer and be like, okay, so how are we going to do this? We're going to want to randomize them. We're going to have a pool of footsteps, and then we implement that, and it sounds like crap. And then you throw everything away, and then you try again. And so, I tried fake footsteps, like maybe grabbing my shoe and just banging it on the desk. That doesn't really work very well. So it's a lot of that.
What did your footsteps end up being?
Actual footsteps, yeah. So I went outside, and I ran around, and that kind of did the trick. But it takes a lot of tweaking because you have to run around for a long time. And let me tell you, I got some really funny looks from people in the streets.
Well, that's why they have Foley studios, so you can go in and walk on a bit of concrete or walk on a bit of gravel or grass or whatever.
If I had money, I might have done that. Yeah.
There's a number of that, especially around your area, your neck of the woods in that part of the world. There's a lot of studios that tend to offer free time to designers, to sound designers, in return for a little bit of work. In return for giving them a bit more. I can find some information for you actually, because one of the sound designers that I was speaking to, he had that deal going on. I don't know where it came from, but I can ask him. I'll let you know.
That's cool. I was in Finland at the time, though, which was really out in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't in Helsinki, so you probably wouldn't have heard of it.
If it was in Finland, how did you get footsteps at anything other than the snow?
Well, you got a polar bear, laid it down on the snow.
Okay.
There you go. There's a carpet
so it melts
for you.
the snow. Ah, clever.
You get a big leaf blower.
No, I meant walk
blow away.
Do leaf blowers work on snow?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Advice brought to you by people who really know what they're talking about.
One thing we found, I did a skateboard game called Skate or Die many years ago, and we found with the footsteps.
That was you?
We did all the... It never got released, so it wasn't the C64 version, this was a PlayStation 2, an Xbox game. We found with the third, it's very, because we had the footsteps, the guy running around, and it sounded wrong and empty, and we spent weeks and weeks and weeks on the sound. So we realized what was missing was all the sound of all the clothes rustling, because you're wearing like nylon clothes and jeans, it's all that rustling of the clothes, the footsteps. And I was walking home one night, like 2 in the morning, working silly hours, and I'm walking home going, I can't hear my footsteps. I've got rubber shoes. They make no noise at all. But I could hear my jeans rubbing and my jacket. And then the next day I'm like, we need the clothes sound effect. And put those in, and suddenly the footsteps didn't sound like they were so isolated.
Yeah.
And, that was our secret.
I would never have thought of that.
Yeah, one thing you kind of figure out, too, when you start working on sound is that sometimes the way the world actually sounds, it doesn't make sense if you put it in games or movies, and it doesn't sound real if it were to sound that way in a game or in a movie, then you'd be like, that's weird. That's not the way it sounds when it actually is. So sometimes you have to. There's the famous example of the coconuts standing in for the sound of horses, that's not what horses sound like. But that originated on radio. But that's kind of it's just a way to translate the real world into games or movies or whatever.
For example, the sound of fire is the crinkling of paper. You can actually use the sound of paper being crinkled to make it sound like a fire.
I know that punching and fight is often chopped vegetables. Yeah. It's a cleaver through a cabbage.
There's a lot of these Foley tricks that I think most of them originated in some of them for radio plays and stuff like that, and then a lot of the early days of movies where they did all those tricks with chopping vegetables or hitting a baseball bat against a piece of meat or something like that, and the coconuts, the famous coconuts.
I remember we were playing San Andreas. I was playing it, and my girlfriend at the time asked me why the gun sounds sounded so crap and weird, and I was like, that's what guns sound like. Real guns are a short, tiny crack of nothing, and gun sounds in films are like cannons and massive sniper all layered on top.
As someone who has shot quite a few different types of guns, I can tell you they are very different in real life than they are in movies. And they're very different
when you're shooting them.
Yeah, there's a very famous recording of one gunshot recorded on quarter-inch tape, cassette tape, digital, and they recorded it on like 30 different mediums, and it sounds completely different. What you record it on, so you get saturation point, and you get nice distortion and nice warm thing. And we found, we were doing a game called Black, we did all these gunshot sounds, we went and we recorded everything, and we came back, and he's like, "They sounded so cool," and we listened to the recordings going, "These sound awful."
Yep.
They're real, they're completely real, and they sound terrible. We threw them all away and did all our gun sounds essentially from raw samples and made them completely from scratch, because it just, real stuff sounds crap.
Yeah, different, again, as you said, different gear that you record through, different microphones, all have characteristics. Like this microphone, as I said, it's quite rich, it's quite deep. There's another microphone I tried for the podcast stuff, for example, and that was really echoey and really tinny and hollow. And every mic has its own characteristics. Put it through different interfaces, put it through different preamps and compressors, and it makes a huge difference. And there's all the other signal chain stuff as well. But again, Joost will be more, hopefully be more into that stuff than I am these days. I'm a bit out of the loop with it.
Well, unfortunately, we found the solution is the most ridiculous one. So when we recorded Cars, we had up to 13 microphones on the car simultaneously, and we recorded all of them, because some cars, you know, the Beyerdynamics condenser mic sounds the best, and other ones we found that the little one at the back sounds the best. But you could not judge this, and when you've got a, you know, $3 million race car that you've got for 2 hours, you don't have time to go, you should probably get that back. You got to get it right first time. And
there's also the science of sound as well. There is a bit of mathematics involved in it. The length of sound waves makes a big difference to how close and how far microphones should be. If you've got two, like when you record in a guitar cab, for example, you might want a mic right on the corn that's picking up the harshness. You might want one a couple of inches away, and you're thinking, why do I want one a couple of inches away? It makes a huge difference to the sound. Just the positioning, moving it left and right. I mean, you have to tweak these things in a studio to get the professional like albums that you hear that come out the shops, and the same applies to any sounds, and game sounds are the same.
The best trick we found was amazing. We got a tiny little microphone and a tea strainer, which is a like it's a circle of like metal mesh, and you get half a tea strainer, which is just like a dome, filled it full of cotton wool, and duct tape that onto the cars, and those are the best things ever at picking up all the sounds and getting rid of all the wind noise. And that's again, it's a trade secret that took, I don't know, 5 or 6 years recording cars. For someone going, I've got a tea strainer, I'm going to duct tape on the back of the car and see what happens, and it sounded great.
It's funny how that something turns out, isn't it? The most low-tech solutions sometimes work just the best.
Yes, absolutely, and people should remember that. There's a question coming in from Facington for you. For game sounds, do you generally have to master sounds heavily? Does it take up a large portion of production time like it does with, say, normal production?
Well,
this is one for all of you and the sound world.
In my personal experience, mastering game sounds is different from mastering an album, a track, you know, even voiceover stuff. Voiceover stuff's very, very simple in general. As long as you've got a good compressor, a good mic, you generally don't need to do much to it. And quiet room, of course, as well. And the size of the room makes a difference, you know. Everything to do with the room that you're recording in and all of the gear, everything makes a big difference. And you can it's a lot of experimentation, swapping things in and out. So you don't really need to master too much at that point. For anybody who doesn't know what mastering specifically is, by the way, mastering is something that you do at the end of the process, after you've done recording, after you've done editing, after you've done mixing, and you make that sound. You basically raise the volumes, you give it compression to some extent if you want to go down that route. Compression kind of levels things out and makes them sound a lot more level, and you can hear everything a little bit more. When it comes to sound effects, I don't know. I mean, I imagine I've done, from the sound effects I've done, I've recorded them, and I've just thrown a compressor on there or a limiter or something, and just tweaked it a little bit, and it's fine. Bit of EQing possibly, haven't needed to do much when you're listening to a sound big difference.
As
my
he makes little
experience
noises
so far.
here.
Now his computer just went into standby because he hadn't touched his
Yes. And hello, Retro Geek. Welcome to the Datamine. We are a bunch of independent developers talking about independent development, and we're specifically talking about sound and music in games and what it really takes to do. So, welcome. We have, by the way, had a winner for our very first Steam key for Cube -1, and that would, believe it or not, be Mythalore. And you'll be getting a Steam message from me in just a Twitch message from me in just a second with your key. I do have 2 other keys that I'll be giving away, but we'll pick random words based on what these 3 gentlemen say, and we will then continue that. And then a little bit later, towards the end of the show, I'll actually tell you how you can get your hands on a pair of Gunnar optics in fire orange red color, which is just absolutely amazing, and they're the interceptors. But yes, so on that note, we will continue. Moving into something that I have a curious question for all of you. When you guys work on a game and you guys are looking at putting a game sounds in, do you guys actually think ahead of time of what sounds you're going to add in, how you're going to trigger them in the actual code itself? Or is this something that you just kind of go, oh, now I need to add sound? Or are you guys, because one of the things that I was talking about earlier with Joost was the fact that there tends to be a couple of different types of developers out there. Those who realize sound is a part of the game, so they plan for it at the very start. And those who kind of go, oh, we need sound now. Maybe we should do that. So I'm curious where you guys are at with your development.
Personally, I think I'll just very quickly say this. I won't go into the answer for that, but personally, I think sound is one of in fact, the most important thing in a game. I know you have to have everything else as well, but if you have a game without sound, no one wants to play it. Unless it's a very, very, very simple puzzle game.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to disagree with you very heavily.
I knew you would. I could see it on your face.
Well, the problem is, I mean, so just my background, I was a AAA developer for 12 years, and I only did audio. Literally, I was an audio guy. That's what I did.
What?
Yeah, that's what I did.
I thought you were a programmer.
Yeah, I was an audio programmer. That's all I did was audio programming. Literally, dedicated 100% audio programming. That was my thing. So let that sink in for a moment.
No, you didn't say that. You didn't say that before. You told me you were an engine programmer and all kinds of stuff. So.
Well, he's
audio engine.
Remember, we're dealing with somebody here who is old. He's probably done it all.
What we found, and it's horrifying. So the first one was the Xbox had a facility to play custom soundtracks. So you could put a custom soundtrack onto any game, and you could replace the soundtrack. And we're like, oh no. And it's shocking how many people will replace your wonderful soundtrack that, you know, it's mastered to swell up here and it's linked to this here, and they go black death metal all over, right over, destroying all of it. And it is genuinely horrifying how many people don't care about audio in a game. On mobile phones, it's like 80% of people on mobile phones do not play their games with sound.
I agree there. But that's why I said simple games. When I play Candy Crush and things like that, I don't ever have any sound on because it's just annoying and people wonder what the hell I'm doing in the toilet. You know, all the noise is going on.
Well, at least now we know where you play your games.
But we pull back stats and stat tracking. You know, we found anything up to about 40% of Xbox 360 gamers didn't bother turning the sound up.
Well, okay, right. Let me rephrase.
Insane.
See, that's the thing. Take it into the PC spectrum, because this is one of the biggest areas where it's so easy for people to just recognize, and for those of you who are gamers, like myself, who will recognize this, Control-S, Control-M. Those two things, your music is gone, your sound is gone, you can have whatever music you want to listen to on your PC or what have you. And in all honesty, there are some games where that's perfectly fine. However, I have found that there are other games, and oddly enough, the Cube game is one of them, where to me, if you didn't have the soundtrack, you'd be missing out on the full experience, and it would not be anywhere near as rich or as evocative as it could be. So there are other games where the sound is damn important, but hearing from you that you guys suffered because of a design choice to make things easier for the users is kind of, in a way, interesting, but at the same time terrifying to me. Because the last thing you want to do is spend all that time and money in producing something and then have it completely and utterly either ignored or demolished by something, you know?
Even inside the team, every game I worked on, we were requested to have the option to turn the audio off. So when people are working on the game, they don't have to listen to the audio repeatedly. And I was like, well, no one would ever turn the graphics off. And it was shocking. And again, people want to listen to their own music. We also found a very interesting thing about audio is that people's ears get tired of it. So what would happen is we put the menu sound effects in January, and the producers go, that's brilliant. And in April, they go, we don't really like the menu sound effect. We think they're not very good. And do new ones, they're like, oh, they're great. And then in July, they go, we don't like the menu sound effects. But what's happened is we had to explain to them, is the sound effects were good the first time, but your ears have got bored of listening to it. Yeah. And this is the hardest bit about being an audio guy, is not to get bored of hearing it. And what we did, is we ended up disabling most of the sound effects on all the Burnout games. I think we did it on and on Black. All the sound effects are disabled, and they're only enabled for builds. So only that big end of the month build where everyone played a build, people heard the sound effects for the first time, because if they'd heard that every day, 8 hours a day for the last month, they were driven.
I have to totally agree there, because music's the same again. Music gets boring if you listen to it. Even my favourite bands, I have to give a break every now and again and then try the albums again in a few months or whatever. Now, Zumbapulp has just said something that I've been trying to get in for ages, actually. He's just said that sounds are very different from music when it comes to the game. And when I said my comment earlier, I'm talking about the sounds in the game, not the music. The music, as much as some games, it's really, really important. Some, especially for atmospheric games. I'm trying to think of an example, but some of them, the raised hairs on the.
He gave an example. He asked, and this was specifically for you, Joost, how would you think about going about doing a sound for a game where you had to suggest a creature, like, say, a zombie, without actually having them in game?
Right.
So there's an example for you. That's a sound effect more so than a soundtrack. How would your thought process be for that?
I also an example of because we were talking about types of games. The different types of games where audio plays a different role. In Candy Crush, it certainly doesn't play that type of role. But if you have a game, like say a horror game, and you're not showing the monster, but you're hinting at it through audio. That's then audio plays a story role, which is of course very, very different.
Very different, and you couldn't play a game like that without it. And I have to disagree with anybody who says that you could turn the sound off on those or the music off on those kind of games.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I agree with you. They shouldn't. I'm just saying they do, and I hate it all.
Okay, they do. But you have to give people options. What I'm saying is how the game should be played is very different from how someone might play it.
Yeah, we were talking about Miami Vice a little bit earlier, which a movie I haven't seen. But you said that they don't. There's no. There's no soundtrack in the movie, and I think that's.
I think No Country for Old Men did that as well.
It's the most bizarre thing when you go to a movie theater and you play a game or whatever, you're so used to hearing something that kind of hints to what you're supposed to feel about the scene, maybe being terror or love or comedic,
tells you.
And there's nothing at all. It's like just dead space, and it is this awkward silence, and it is so uncomfortable to sit through. And it took me a while to figure out why. I was sitting there going, "There's no music."
Yeah, so you don't. Generally, you don't want to have the option to shut off the music in a movie, because it's just part of the story that the movie is telling. If you were to shut that off, you get a very awkward experience. And now it's a little bit different with games, especially because there are so many different types of games. I think that's probably outside my house.
And that would be the zombie effect that we were looking for. And speaking of zombies, if you would like a chance to get a key for Cube A -1, type the word zombie in chat, all lowercase. Go ahead.
There's a zombie squirrel.
Yeah, I think so. But there's different types of games, of course. But there's plenty of games where the music and the sound work together with the game to just tell the story or create the experience. Games like Candy Crush are an extreme example of where that's not really necessary. RTS games usually won't, have that much necessity for music, maybe a little bit more for sound, but then games like, let me think of a good example there, like Limbo, for example. It's a game that people say it doesn't really have music, but the guy who did the audio disagrees. He says, well, there certainly is a soundtrack. The soundtrack is on Bandcamp too, and if you were to remove what he did for music, it's very ambient stuff, and it's almost, are they sound effects or is it music? But it's very, very closely related to it's very intertwined with the game itself and with the gameplay. So I don't know if you guys have all played Limbo, probably.
Yeah. Recently, actually.
Which was a great game, but one of the reasons is I remember, the first time you see that spider, it's like, oh my god, like the hairs just rise up on your arm. And one of the reasons is the sound, I think. just that spider, just the way that the spider moves. It's creepy enough, but without that sound, that grating sound, there's this this kind of distorted sound that's just kind of on the edge of what you're hearing, and it just really drives home that creepy big spider. And I think without that, it wouldn't have made that point.
I don't know if Limbo the ambient used the same trick that Warcraft used. So in Duskwood, when we were doing Colin McRae, the audio designer I was working with was get really into Warcraft, and he's like, we're talking about the Duskwood ambience, and we were like, why is it so spooky? It turns out it uses a 30 hertz tone, and 30 hertz is just about the same frequency that a lion roars at, and we're kind of genetically predisposed to not really like that frequency. So if you play that, just that sort of, you can't even hear it, just sort of down there, and your neck sort of goes, I don't like that, and you don't even realize why it is.
This reminds me very specifically of I don't know if you guys saw the first Resident Evil movie. But
yes, I have seen
the
it.
soundtrack for that was done by Marilyn Manson and a couple of guys who are, honest to God, brilliant composers. Now, they came in with the typical... no offense. I like Marilyn Manson, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. But these are the guys who are so used to doing the composition pieces for movies, etc. They came in with a certain idea. Marilyn Manson's idea was... let's play with sounds that most people don't recognize, like that 30 hertz tone, like that one's towards the higher spectrum that you don't really hear, but it still has some kind of effect on you because you don't register that you're hearing it, but you're still hearing it, and it causes just all the hairs to go up and your spine to go straighter and the sweat to break out on your skin. And it was all based on him going, let's push that and not just focus on, this needs to have a little bit of a minor chord here. It's not about that. It's about taking the different sounds and the different hertz and frequencies and pushing them to their limit, and then putting in something that could fit it. So like action music to show that, hey, everyone's running, or, this is the sound of the theme for Alice or something like that. It all kind of melds together.
When it comes to the actual sound design part of it, or the composition part of it as well, remember that mixing those sounds in the right way make a big difference as well. Again, my only experience really is from doing band stuff, but again, it relates directly to tracks on a composition on a game. For example, having one guitar tweaked at 500 hertz and making it a little bit more crunchy than another guitar, you can hear the distinct differences between them, and the same applies for any instrument. Every instrument has a sweet spot for different types of sounds and different types of tones. A snare on a drum kit has about 3 or 4 different particular EQ spots that you can tweak a little bit to get different, air on the snare, or different snap, or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's 2 sides to sound as well. That I think I kind of think about it the same way I think about food. If you will bear with me for just a second, it might be a weird comparison, but a lot of people, when they think of food, they think of how it tastes, right? But there's also a very important part, which is the texture of the food.
And the smell.
The same, and the smell, of course, yeah. And so those are different components, and I think for sound, there's a similar thing. There's just the taste, if you will, of sound, but the texture is really important too. Like, sound doesn't just tell you that, this is a car going by, or a door just opened, or whatever, or somebody's walking. But it also gives texture. It also makes you actually feel what's going on, and the way you can really tell that that's happening is if you turn it off for a second, or it's driven home for me a lot when I'm given something to put sound over, and so I see it without sound, and then I try to put sound under it. So say there's like a meteorite that just crashed into a hillside, and it's laying there and it's burning, or still glowing. And then you put like some kind of deep, fiery sound under it, and suddenly you feel that it's there. It changes, completely changes the dynamic of before it was just a glowy thingy in a hillside, but now it's actually, it has properties. It comes to life. It becomes like a 3D object, even if it's not a 3D object, even if it's in like a 2D game or something like that. You really feel.
Sorry.
world.
If
Chris
there
is
was
like,
no sound
"I'm
at
gonna
that
say
moment,
this."
though, sound is a really big passion of mine because of my past. These days I don't do much with it, but I do love how sound makes you feel and how it makes you, how it affects your experience. If that particular meteor crash didn't have, you'd look at it and you'd be like, oh, it looks pretty, or you might even not pay attention to it. Sound draws you in. Whether it's from afar or right when you're sat in front of the screen, sound is the thing that makes you kind of, I don't know. To me, it makes me invest in the game a little bit more. It gives me goosebumps occasionally. It is the thing with everything else, with the vision and with every other stimulus that you have with computers these days. You know, your VR and everything else. That all adds to the experience, and it's senses, isn't it? At the end of the day, you're improving your experience with additional senses. When they start putting smells in games, that's when I think I'll probably back out.
I think I'm going to avoid that, considering some of the games that I really appreciate happen to be things like zombie games.
It's true. Sound is. I think sound has a much more direct pathway to your emotions than vision does. That's not to say that vision is like that art or anything like that is less important than sound. Not at all. But sound is bypasses your rationale much more than things that you see.
You
So
logically
hear
try to
something-
understand stuff you see, whereas you emotionally try to understand the things you hear.
Well, there isn't really an
Welcome
uncanny
to
valley
this.
for audio, I think. I think it's probably, like, if you see visuals, you'd be like, but with audio, you don't tend to get that. You tend to believe what you hear to a great degree.
Yeah, and you probably all have heard those 3D soundscapes where somebody like cuts your hair or something. You put on headphones, and you have this what do they call it? Like something
Binaural.
Binaural, yes.
Yeah, I was about to say biannual.
Biannual.
Is that how often you get your hair cut?
Yeah. 1 year you get your hair cut, one where somebody whispers in your ear, and when you put on good headphones and you listen to that, it really you really feel it. Like somebody whispers into your ear, you really kind of feel like the breath on your ear.
Yeah.
But that's a feeling. That's another sensation as well, though. It's different slightly to what we're talking about here. Well, and again, that meteor crash. If you were in front of a meteor crash, you would hear it, you would feel it, and you would see it. You would feel it and hear it if you weren't looking at it, wouldn't you? If you were looking away from it, you'd still feel it and hear it. It's all of them put together that makes a difference. But sound in itself is one of the few mediums that stands up on its own, if you think about it. Because sound, if you think about how radio started and still is quite popular, even with all of the new technology that we've got, radio and music it stands on its own, whereas you add videos to that music and to make it more of an experience and draw other viewers in. But I think sound, I can listen to a soundtrack, but I couldn't just watch a game without any music personally. Again, I know that's different. Everyone's got a different view on that, I suppose.
Although, of course, there's a lot of paintings that are really nice, and
Okay, I'm not an art person. Then I think let's go. I think that's probably better if I maybe stay away from that, because I don't particularly do much with art and sculptures and things. Doesn't turn me on really.
You can certainly say that there's. I think if you ask a couple of random people on the street, then you'll find more people who regularly listen to music than people who regularly stare at paintings. If you know what I mean. It's just,
and how much? I can listen to the same piece of music. I know we were talking about fatigue earlier, but I can listen to the same piece of music and same soundtrack. And I listen to game soundtracks quite a lot when I'm game developing. It gives me a bit of inspiration. But I wouldn't sit and watch and look at it. But then again, people buy pictures for the walls, don't they? That they want to look at it repeatedly. So maybe maybe I'm just on my own here.
Maybe you're just stuck in your own era. I'm going to pull for something from the chat here from Matthew W191, who's made mention of the new 4K sound. Now this is interesting to me because this is one of the things that is hyping. And when new things get hyped, there's always some kind of impact. Like we were talking about the last time we had a show when we were talking about VR integration. It's a hype in its own right. There are certain games that'll work for. There are certain things it really is not worth. I mean, if you play Candy Crush with the Oculus Rift, there's something I think inherently wrong with that kind of a concept. But maybe it might make it more exciting. Maybe, I don't know. But in this particular case, he says with the new 4K sound, I think developers need to have a hard, long look and think as the new 4K sound will change how the music and sound sounds or comes across.
I absolutely disagree.
What on earth is
Right.
4K sound?
4K.
Here we go.
You know
This is education.
HD sound. You know the when HDMI became popular a few years back and 1080p came out. HDMI cables also transmit HD sound. All it is a higher fidelity, higher bit rate, nicer sounding thing. Now
I thought we already transmitted 5.1 uncompressed audio on HDMI. I thought that was.
Yes, we do, but that was HDMI. But 4K is bigger and better again. However, if you think about the evolution of sound, the only thing, as soon as we went to HD, no one cared. I mean, in games or in film, it doesn't make much difference, I don't think. And the 4K leap is going to be the same. The only thing that changed sound as a mass medium for the consumer market, I think, is the surround sound introduction, because that again increased your feeling and it increased your engrossment in the medium.
How many? What percentage of people do you think run a surround sound setup that is correctly configured?
I think that there is that as well. I mean, I'm pretty.
No.
I'd say roughly about
I'm a bit of an
like
audiophile
this.
personally, but
Yeah, well, see,
Yeah.
I know I'm an audiophile
3%.
myself. My stereo setup is there, and it took
Yeah,
me.
I haven't got around to plugging in my ears yet.
It took me a week and a half to get it configured correctly. And it was with constant testing, because I'd have it just right for the music, but it was screwed up for the television. It was screwed up for the games. And it took me a while to get it. And now I've got presets for everything to be just where everything needs to be, depending on what it is I'm using that particular system for. But yes, it's a pain.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who like to think they know they've got it configured, but the reality is they probably don't.
No,
there's also pseudo surround sound as well within headphones and things like that they're doing. Not your surround sound specifically. You know what I mean? You know the
pseudo.
fake surround sound in headphones.
It's actually funny you mentioned that. I was playing Divinity just this past week, and I accidentally had my right earphone in my left ear and my left in my right ear, and I heard this sound, and it was just, one of these little ads, and it was all like hippopotamus, hop, 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 and it was really funny. I'm like, I should go check this out. I ran the wrong direction because I had the wrong ears in the wrong place, and I stopped and I went.
This is how
it was one of those things. I now literally have to check every time I put them in to make certain they're in right, because of that use of quote-unquote stereo sound.
Now,
when I bought these headphones, it came with a little bit of instructions that goes, how to use. L is for the left and R is for the right. And I laughed going, now who's not going to know that?
No, mine has that as well. It's just I picked them up, and I was not feeling well last week at all, so I didn't really care which one I put them in. It was just, they're in my ears. Yeah, it's okay. I could go now.
Now, when we used to play Quake 2 a lot, we used to rely on hearing pickups go on at particular parts of the map. And I don't know if they had surround sound in Quake 2. I don't think it was surround. I think it was just stereo. But we knew that is a pickup sound. That has spawned, because that's a learning process. That spawned 30 seconds ago. Someone must have picked that up. Oh, someone's just got the mega health. Quickly run towards a mega health room or whatever.
When we played Doom on a LAN, people with stereo sound cards had to put it into mono because it was such an advantage.
I played the first Call of Duty with a friend when I was a kid. We would get into empty servers just to play against each other, and talk to each other on like TeamSpeak or whatever was the equivalent back then. And he always kicked my ass up and down because he had a surround sound system, and he always heard me coming, just always, and it drove me mad. But it really is. It's an incredible advantage in games like that. Because you're really silent and listen, you can just hear him coming from whatever direction. And if you have even a stereo setup, then you're at a huge disadvantage. It's true.
Yes, absolutely.
Music.
Oh, we all agree. Wow, blimey.
I was about to say, this is one of those. This is one of those moments where it's just like, it shouldn't happen. It's too weird. And yes, if you guys would like. The last key, by the way, if you just type music into the chat, we'll do the thing.
Can I ask you a quick question that I've been meaning to ask for a while? When you separate game music and game sound, is there much of a separation? Sorry, when you do a soundtrack to when you're doing the game design, the sound design for a game and doing sound effects, etc. Is there a different workflow that you follow?
Well, I mean, making music is different than making sounds. But it depends kind of on what kind of sounds, because there's kind of, it's a gray scale. It's not really that something is definitely music or something is definitely sound, which is actually an interesting thing that we ran into at the end of development. Is we wanted to put in sliders for sound effects and music, just volume sliders. And we couldn't figure out a reliable way to discern what was music and what was sound, because there were always exceptions somewhere in the middle area.
Well, that's ambience, though, isn't it?
Yeah, like there's ambience and there's things that kind of melt into the soundtrack a little bit. So footsteps, definitely sound effects. That's just, well, we talked about that a little bit. You kind of try to go out and capture some footsteps, but then there's some more abstract things like at the end of levels in Cuba -1, you go through a portal. That's just the end of the level thing. That's the point. You go to the end. There's a portal. You go through. The level ends. So it had to make a sound. We wanted to have it make a sound, and of course portals like that don't exist in real life. So you kind of have to think of something, and it became this. Well, it has sort of a tone, and like you mix all these things into it, and you get completely free reign, because there's no predetermined way that something like this sounds, so you can kind of just experiment, really.
Well, to me, a sound effect is something that's reactionary to something that you do in the game, whether it's an NPC making a sound, or it's you as the player making a sound, or it's the environment making a sound.
Yeah.
You've got the ambient noise, which is kind of stuff that you can't see, like frogs and making, crickets or even things like that. I'm thinking of something very linear here. I'm not. There's a lot of games, arty games, that tend to, as you said, it's more abstract and they kind of mix things in with each other. But going through a portal, to me, is a sound effect. You don't have to hear that.
Yeah, but
That's true.
What you've missed out there is HUD. So on Burnout, we had 3 sliders. We had music, sound effects, and HUD. And HUD was what we described as a non-diegetic sound effect. So this is something that doesn't exist in the world, but is clearly not sound effects. So you could actually tweak there. Those are the 3 sliders we gave people.
Now there's like 12 in games.
Yeah, there is a lot in most games these days, yeah.
Need for Speed had loads, and we're like, thanks guys, mute everything except the tyres. How have you guys done the tyre sound effects? Great. Mute everything except the engines. How have you guys done the engine sound effects? Yeah. Don't give people too many sliders.
No.
where we had trouble in the difference between sound and music in this particular game was that there were certain areas because I didn't want to kill the game with music, right? Because it's a long game. There's 6 times 6 levels, I think, and I almost have 1 song for every level, so that's a lot of music. But I figured you may not want to spend every second of that. You don't want to fill every second of that with music. So there's certain levels where the music is triggered at a certain point, or where it ends, or where it fades out at a certain point. And so there's some levels where I think the first level of the second world, for example, there's a new cube introduced, and I trigger some kind of a sound there to kind of like show like, ooh, this is something new, like just kind of pay attention here. But it's a chord, and I mix some ambient sounds in with it, so it's like it's a little piece of music, but it also is like kind of like the wind is picking up at the same time, So, and it's only 10 seconds long. So is that music or is that sound? That can be kind of hard to determine.
Did you do any EQing with the music to make it fit in with the sound effects, or did you not go to that level of sort of tweaking?
EQing, you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to as much as I could. The truth is, though, that right until the end of development, I switched songs around a lot. So I'd just be writing songs as much as I could, write music as much as I could, and I tried to do
1 second, I've got to interrupt somebody's sound effects.
Sorry.
Mr. Mechanical Keyboard.
Everyone tells me off for it as well, right? I'll mute my mic.
Wow.
I have a quiet keyboard. I can type ever so quietly. Nobody knows.
Yes, I can be very gentle with my keyboard as well.
Naked dwarves. See, didn't even hear.
I was really trying to type quietly then as well. It's a really loud keyboard. I'm sorry.
It's not every day we get naked dwarves on a show. Just so people are aware, Apollyon is the one who got the last key. The one thing that we have now to give away are the Gunner glasses. And the Gunner glasses are literally going to be given away to people who are actively involved in chat. So if you've got questions you want to throw to any of these individuals, yes, that might even be you too. Who knows? But yes, so if you are actively involved and you've got questions for us, and you have questions for Joost, LaunchableSocks. I can't believe I spelled that wrong. And for those of you who are aware, it is not DJ Arcus for his Twitter. It is actually Fortress Craft. I put it wrong, and I blame the fact that I'm still on 11 medications for this jaw thing, my back thing, and everything else. But if you are interested, get your questions in and try to make them make sense. If you just ask why blue, not going to be a good enough question to get you entered in to win these Gunner optics. Remember, these are the very special ones. They're brand new. They are orange interceptors. They are gorgeous. And I will be happy to pass them on because our latest winner kindly said, yeah, could you please make sure these get to somebody else? So, Edvardo, cheers. And on that note, I throw to you guys some final thoughts about music, some final thoughts about sound effects, some final thoughts about integration after we give Joost a chance to finish answering the question that you had asked because we were interrupted by the Naked Dwarf keyboard.
And we won't type. There'll be no typing.
Hands up the keyboard.
Hand check.
Dwarf.
You missed it. You were busy.
Where was I? What was I saying?
Naked dwarfs, apparently. Whoever they are.
Queuing.
You asked me about EQing the music. Mostly, for me, it was just a matter of making the music sound good. I wrote music that was lugged around levels a lot and placed in levels differently. So some levels just, you start the level, the music starts playing and it loops. Pretty straightforward. But some levels I wanted to place it in certain areas, have it triggered by certain events, and that kind of changes how you want to place it and where you want to place it in the soundscape. So I did as much as I could.
Say, we found on some of the games that we've worked on that the music started to overpower the sound effects or vice versa, and that you end up with two things fighting for the same space. So on Burnout, I'll see if I can do this in the camera, you've got your frequency spectrum from bass to treble, and I can't remember where it was something about 2,000 hertz up to about 10,000 hertz, so like an 8 kilohertz chunk of the music we brought down by 20 dB. So if you were to look at this and analyze it, you just went bass, 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 nothing for the mid-range, and then all the
see that a lot.
Because we couldn't fit because engines for cars are enormous static noise makers, and we couldn't get them to fit with music. And if you were to listen to the music outside of the game, it sounds horrendous, like really bad. Slap some engines in there, filling up that nice 8 kilohertz spectrum in the middle. Suddenly it sounds great, and it's those things that it's really hard as an audio guy. You listen to each thing by itself, and it sounds awful. But when it comes together, and that's so difficult. And when you're working on it, it changes all the time as well.
Alternatively, you listen to each individual bit, and they sound awesome individually, and then you put them all together, and it's just a cacophony of horribleness. And
endless tweaking. It's endless working on it. I mean, of course, I didn't have cars in the game that I worked on. So
lucky you.
That's I count myself
lucky.
See,
there's something to be said for that. I mean, you've got two different sides of things. You've got the things that really exist in our day and age that everyone has a concept of is supposed to sound a certain way, and then you have the world where there are sounds that nobody has ever heard of before, such as portal sounds, such as the sound of a portal gun. And I'm totally obsessed on Portal right now because of this. But there's something to be said for trying to get it so it sounds right for reality, but then if there's nothing there, trying to get it so it doesn't sound like something else, yet it's still unique, yet it still sounds like what it's supposed to match everything else, even though everything is completely made up. There's pros and cons to both sides, obviously, yeah?
Yeah, and well, for me, for music, I spent most of the time I spent on it is kind of, what I wanted to do with it is something different, is that every sound in the soundtrack, in the music, is a sound that I recorded somewhere. So what I did a lot was kind of just pick the right sounds to fit with each other. So I'd go to like toy stores and buy like toy instruments, or I'd go to like flea markets and find things that make sound, you know, and I would just turn those into instruments using Ableton Live mostly, and kind of like make the music out of that. So that was something that took up a lot of my time and energy, and I think that also kind of dictates where the music, what kind of space the music takes up a little bit. But I think I was lucky in that it's not an action game. Cuba -1 it's really laid back. It's atmospheric, so I had a lot of room to experiment with that, and so I didn't have things like guns or cars or anything like that. So something that took up the most space in your ears, I think, was footsteps. Other than that, it's just mostly ambience, picking up cubes, putting them down, you know, the occasional door opening up and shutting again. So it's not really anything that's constant or intruding. So I think I had a lot of room to work.
Did you take like a lead role on it? Were you given complete freedom, or were you working with like a programmer and working to their spec, or working to the project lead spec, or whatever?
Well, I was just kind of in the beginning. It was just like, okay, we're making a game, and just go and do the sounds. Just off with you, make some sounds.
Go forth, multiply the sounds, all the frequencies.
Yes, indeed. Have fun out there. But yeah, of course, I ended up working very closely together with the programmer. We would just every time I'd need something, I would just go over to him, which was really nice that I was in Finland for most of the production, because I would just kind of turn around and be like, "Hey, can we do this?" And he'd go, "Yeah," and we'd do it. You know, things like you know, the footstep system. Like, okay, we'd think about that, and he would make me a system where you know, I'd put in a pool of sounds, and it would randomize which one it would play. So you know, you don't hear the same footsteps over and over, and or if you fall off a level, you know, there was a lot of thinking in that, and so what kind of happened usually was that I imagined how that would sound or how that would go. So you'd fall off a level. I imagined you know, the screen would go white. You could fade out to white, and then fade back in. You're back on the level, and I get kind of an image in my head of how I wanted that to sound. So I wanted to, you know, you start falling off, you hear the wind rush, and you hear your clothes, like, you know, move around, rustle a bit, and then some kind of, you know, kind of a punch when you're put back, when you're spawned back on, and you know, it's just, then it's, at that point, it's just like I try to explain that to him, and then at that point, it's just a lot of experimenting in how you can make that happen, because there's a lot of programming, of course, that goes with that. You have to time it correctly, and so that part of it is, of course, our programmer did that, because I'm a terrible, I know nothing about programming, well, next to nothing. So so it was really teamwork, like close teamwork on those parts of it.
That actually brings up a really interesting question. This is something that Joost and I were talking about before the show itself, and that is with how engines are changing for developers, and the tools that you guys can get your hands on to actually create games allows a lot of flexibility, including in the area of sound, and such as dynamic sound events and things like that. So to sort of pick on the two brains that you guys have, because you both are inside engines right now building something, where mine is more tabletop oriented, so I don't have an engine yet. My question for you is, when it comes to the concept of including your sound in your sound effects and everything else that goes with it, what options are you finding are coming more and more popular for you, say in the Unity engine, for having something like a dynamic event occur, or, you know, the music change just ever so slightly? Maybe it changes in pitch, so you're playing a different part of the song, or is there something in there to it, or have you not really had a chance to dig into it?
It's changed, hasn't it? Unity's come up with a lot of new things for sound, I think, because it was really lacking. The sound part of Unity was kind of lacking, and we had to build, or at least our programmer actually built me a lot of systems that allowed me to like change music dynamically like throughout the level. But I think they implemented a lot of new stuff audio-wise in Unity.
I mean, unfortunately, Unity is basically Fmod, which is the dirty also ran of the audio middleware. Most commercial games are now using what's called Wise or Wise, and that's the bee's knees. I find with the if you get into trying to get good audio out of Unity, you will run into a brick wall very quickly. You cannot easily assign things to like filters and effects. You can't assign groups. You've got no mixing control whatsoever, and then you've got no way of dealing with virtual voice managers. You've got no way of dealing with all of the things you need to really squeeze all the audio out. So Unity is, I'd only give Unity like a 3 out of 10 for its audio support. It's good enough for most games.
I have to agree there.
Oh my god, you just couldn't.
I've got it to a point now where I've got a number of functions, just base functions in my base classes that do things like loop audio, play an audio clip. I know Unity provides methods for that, but they weren't really suitable. Things like roll off at the beginning and the end of a clip, and I don't think you can even seek within clips. You can't do like sample 6. You can. But what you have to do, is take the original audio clip, and then you sorry, that ice cream van outside is doing my head in. And you take an audio clip and you cut it. You basically can chop it up dynamically. So you chop it up and then you apply roll-offs and stuff. But I've written functions for all of that. You could probably write a mixer. You could probably write an audio manager.
Really horrible for the overhead of the game itself if you're having to do all this processing behind the scenes on just the sound itself.
Well, there's 2 ways of doing it. One, you could export the clips that you need specifically from whatever program you're using, Cubase or Logic or whatever, or you can do it dynamically. But no, I don't think the overhead's too bad as it stands. I don't get any lag.
I think the way that we did it is I had some songs that I wanted to change them in the level. So there was one level, for example, was kind of basically a big tower that you climb, and you occasionally go inside and then you go outside, and so I wanted the song to be slightly different inside than was outside, but they needed to be synced. So I think what our code guy did, and forgive me if I'm slightly inaccurate because again I don't know a whole lot about code, but he wrote a script and attached it to a box collider that I placed in the tower, and then when you go, and it checks if you're inside or outside of it. So when you run into it, it checks at which sample the song is, and then it takes the other song that it needs to fade it in with and starts it from that same exact sample, and then does a crossfade and then stops the song once it's faded out, if that makes sense.
So you actually crossfade between the 2 rather than trying to keep both of them running?
Yes.
Did you get phasing as they cross over? I mean, how accurate was that seek in Unity?
It was surprisingly accurate. It was because what I did was I wrote I had just one song and it had say percussion, and I wanted to fade that out and fade another instrument in its stead, and that has to be it has to be synced up precisely then, because otherwise a lot of instruments stayed the same, so otherwise you'd hear it immediately. And I think if you play the game, you're not going to hear. You're going to hear it fade, but you're not going to hear. It's not going to go out of sync. So it was really accurate.
One technique that I tend to use in Unity itself is I'll take the length of a clip. So I'll create a clip in Cubase, and then I'll take the length of the clip and use that length to perform tweens or transitions for between. Like, for example, there's a camera does a swoosh into something in one part of my game, and I use the swoosh sound that I've created to determine the length of the swoosh, to how to get from here to here.
Yeah, right.
And it's useful. It's really useful, that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can also just do you can get quite a ways in terms of sound effects or pieces of music that have to fit with a certain length of event. You can get quite a way and just kind of basically stop watching. You can just kind of this is around 10 seconds, and you try something that's roughly 10 seconds. And sometimes that works. Of course, not always, but you can get it to work like that.
I've also run into a few other little tiny workflow issues with audio stuff. Footsteps, for example, you mentioned footsteps a lot. In my game, the footsteps, there is lots of different types of footsteps. It's quite high fidelity when it comes to different surfaces, and there's lots of different surfaces. We also have to have footsteps for things like walking on hologrammatic stairs and things like that don't exist, so I have to create them and make them up. But I said I've got a sound guy doing it. It was one of those things that I wanted to do, but he came along and it was like that. It makes sense for me to farm it out because I just don't have the time to do it myself. Plus he's doing the soundtrack. Anyway, what was I talking about? Footsteps. Oh yeah, one other thing. One tiny little thing that makes a big difference when the sound designer gives me an export of a lot of WAV files. He gives me them and it's like great. I can put them in, throw them in the game. But the sound files have an area of silence at the end, or the roll-off isn't quick enough at the end. And even though it's only a few milliseconds, it makes a big difference to them being played in the game. So if you're walking, the walking in my game is connected to the head bob, so the footsteps depend on which way you're bobbing. And then when the footsteps hit the ground, they have to finish playing before the next one will play. So sometimes it goes off if you don't have the footsteps short enough, if you know what I mean. And again, it's an implementation thing when it comes to the developers, but it's nice that game programmers and game sound designers need to work together. There's no real alternative. You can't just go off and create me some sounds. There has to be some workflow involved in that.
Absolutely, you have to work. I mean, the closer you work together with your programmers, or if you do it yourself, that's maybe even better. I don't know, but the closer you work together with the person who programs the sounds, the better your sound is going to be. It's just you're gonna have to get really nice and cozy because it's really important.
Now, there's an interesting question that was thrown out a while ago from Matthew asking what's more important in a game, the music or the sound effects?
Sound effects.
Sound effects.
100%.
Imagine playing a game without sound, but with music, and then vice versa, which, easy.
I mean, I would tend to say, for a lot of games it would be sound effects, but then there are games, there are probably exceptions. I mean, there's just different types of games.
Dance Revolution.
Good point. Rock band, that kind of thing.
Rock band.
That's the thing. You need to keep these things in mind. We've had another question came in from Guernicus who asked if you're mixing for games or when you're mixing music for games, do you use stereo quality headphones or do you just use your basic PC headphones that you have found everybody else uses?
You use the headphones word. Never ever mix on headphones. Absolutely never.
I use my Mackie studio monitors, which are near field, professional grade, not cheap things, but you should be.
Yeah. So
if you mix it on headphones, what will happen is it will sound great. You put it on the television, you go, I can't hear anything I just did.
Yeah. So what you do is you can create on headphones perfectly well because you can hear a lot of things very well. But when you go and when you finish things up, so when you go mix or master, or when you go and determine the final product, you just have to go around and listen to it on a lot of different systems. So you have to listen to it on good speakers. You have to listen to it on crappy speakers. You have to listen to it on your iPod. So you have to kind of try and get as many representations as you can to make sure that it sounds good everywhere.
Sort of like you guys having to take your code to many different platforms and making certain that it'll still work, regardless if someone happens to be running, say, an NVIDIA card versus an ATI card versus some piece of...
I would argue that that the sound, playing sound on different speakers is a lot easier than that because you don't have different you don't have to have the different platforms. You don't have to deploy it.
Yeah, it does.
And then all the issues you get.
A little easier. Just a tiny little bit.
It's interesting. We actually got. I apologize. I've completely forgotten his name. He is a huge famous sound designer. I have totally forgotten his name. He did like Batman. He did loads of films. And EA brought him in for a day. I'll try and look him up. But they brought him in to say it. And one of the questions we said to him, we go, what do you listen to your audio on? And he gives, do you listen to it on TV and speakers? And he was like, I've never watched one of my films anywhere other than cinema. That's what they did. And we were like, well, for the DVD version, do you mix it for home speakers? And he just gave us a look like, no. And apparently, that is not how the film industry does it. And to be quite honest, that's not how the games industry do it. We aim for nice speakers, good, high-quality speakers, because if it sounds good on there, and then you go to someone's speaker who lacks a lot of mid-range, lacks a lot of bass, you can't fix that. So what you do is you aim for something that is a neutral speaker, like the Yamaha NS10s, and then if it sounds good on there, it's going to sound worse on everything else, but there's nothing you can do. There's too many variants.
The Yamaha NS10s are specifically bad speakers. That's why people use them for mixing, because they're not great speakers.
How
that when you
amazing
be
is
in a
that?
studio. I've got to disagree there. Even if someone, if this guy is a professional, you have to do a certain level of mastering on an A/B-ing. Otherwise, the reason for A/B-ing, it's not because if you play a sound on some speakers that don't have very much decent mid-range, then it's not that. That isn't the problem. The problem is mostly the levels. The levels between the mixes, between the tracks, and things like that. If you, for example, you go onto a computer with low, bad mid-range, and you're using a gunshot, something like that, it might sound brilliant on these awesome speakers, but when you go onto this one, you may be able to do something to the EQ where it doesn't sound any different on these speakers, but it sounds much better on the worst speakers, and that's what A/B-ing is for. It's not for going, the whole thing sounds terrible, let's dump it or remix it for this particular it's for making sure that the levels are right.
The problem we found is that, I mean, you go down the QA department and we had, I don't know, 100 different televisions, and we just sit there for TV. We tried this. We tried TV after TV, and we're like, that sounds shit. That one sounds good, and we're like, we can't solve this. There are 10,000 televisions on the market. There are a million sets of speakers. You go for we say, I think we used Mackeys at Codemasters, and then we said, it sounds good on those. That's all we can do, and that is how it's turned out. That's how it is across the entire industry. If it sounds, so the quintessential bit was one of the producers said, "Come here, why does this game sound so shit?" And he was playing it like an 11-inch television, like a tiny little television with inbuilt speakers, and he goes, "It sounds shit." And I'm like, "What would you like me to do?" And there's a speaker this big, and the best bit, he was using a yellow cable and a white cable, and the red one wasn't plugged in. I'm like, "But you're only getting the left-hand side as well. What would you like me to do to solve this? I can't do magic."
I agree. There is only so much you can do, but at the end of the day, that's said in terms of A/B-ing, the only reason for it is to make sure the levels are right, really, because you can't change the fidelity of someone's crappy 11-inch telly or tablet or whatever,
Especially if they're only getting the left side.
Yeah, when we mastered in the studio on just about every game I've done, and from that point onwards, if it sounds crap on a television, it sounds crap on that television. That was always the way we approached it, because what we've done is we've made it sound good, and then we've come back and we've gone, that's not, and we fiddle with it, and then we take it back in the studio and it sounds bad there. And when you're working on a game, the audio departments are sometimes 10, 20, 50. I think the biggest one was Freestyle. There's like 30 people in the audio department. So you set together a rule, it sounds good in the studio, it's mastered in the studio, everyone thumbs up, and you don't touch it again, because you'll get back, sit in front of the television, your headphones going, just tweak that, and
so
you earn money. It's very hard.
For me.
One thing that is exciting, before I'm sure Josie's trying to end the show here, but
I will be in a couple seconds, yes.
Before we finish, one thing we haven't mentioned, I don't think, in terms of we were talking about Unity earlier. Unity, the newer version of Unity, I think it's possibly 5, not 4.6. I think 4.6 has got new GUI or something, but 5 has got a brand new mixer built into it, and it looks amazing, and it looks in comparison to what we've got now, it looks like you will be able to do a lot of the leveling and mixing within Unity.
Unfortunately, if you are developing games for the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4, you are stuck with Unity 4.3, so be aware of that. If you are currently running Unity 4.5 or 4.6, you cannot ever release your game on the Xbox One. It's a nightmare.
Ultimately, I think, to me, the secret to having good sound is, for me at least, is to be creative and imaginative, and you have to try your best to make it sound right, and so you have to dive into the technical stuff a bit, but the best way to make sure that your sound is good is to have cool sounds and to think about them, to make them like slightly different and to make them your own, and don't go into like the stock sounds if you don't have to. Just try and come up with cool solutions yourself, and maybe put in things that people haven't heard before and make something new. You know, I think that's the best way to ensure that your game really does sound good.
I would say the best way to make sure your game sounds good is to love the audio. Like you do. I can tell you do.
Exactly.
If you love it, you will make it sound good. You will find this amazing sound. You put it in, and everyone's like,
Precisely.
"That sounds so cool."
Yeah,
Just love your audio, everyone.
Yeah, and you were talking about Marilyn Manson working on the
Resident Evil
Resident
soundtrack.
Evil. It reminds me of a movie that I've seen years ago, and I forgot what it was called or even what it was about for years. The only thing I remembered was this one song in it, and that helped me find it back again. And it turns out the movie was called Ravenous. It's a movie with I forgot his name, Pierce something. No. Anyway, the soundtrack was written by somebody I don't know, but who writes a lot of movie soundtracks, and the guy from Blur, Damon Albarn.
Oh, wow.
And it creates this mix of classic, just really good, movie soundtrack with kind of weird experimental, slightly pop sounds. And there's this one song that I think is a theme song, and it's under a scene where the main character just like fell off a cliff, and it was a gruesome scene where he broke.
Alert.
Right. Anyway, he's trying to walk back home with like broken legs, kind of, and so the song starts to play, and it's really dark. It's a really dark start, and then it turns into this really, really goofy song because there's another instrument added in, and then the classic movie music side kicks in and it becomes a beautiful song. And it's just like all those elements keep playing, but they're added in one by one, and it takes the song from really dark and kind of scary to incredibly goofy to just beautiful, and it just blows my mind, and that's something I remembered for like 10 years, and I think the reason is because it's this strange mix of it's things we already know, like just classic movie music and Damon Albarn, but you mix them and you get something completely new. So because they both put their personalities in there, it's something that you've never heard before, and it just sticks with you forever.
And you remember, and it helped you find the.
Yeah, and you have to love what you do, and I think the only way that you can achieve something like that is if you love what you do, and so you put your own personality in there. Mm-hmm. I think that's what you have to strive for.
That's kind of what I want from my sound designer. I want his personality in it. I want everybody in my team to add their own bit of juice, to the game. But, so I've given him a lot. I've given him a lot of control.
Yeah.
Right. Here's what
that's
I'm
the only
going
way
to
you
do.
can ensure that your game doesn't sound like anybody else's.
I'm going to
Hey,
totally cut
Josie,
people
what's the
off.
time, by the way?
Yes, I know. We've been a little busy today talking about sound. It seems to be one of those topics where we're just going to have to get used to rejoin us again, because there are an awful lot of things about sound. And for example, we've learned that Adam is a bit deeper in sound than he liked to admit to start it. And then we also know that Chris has been heavily involved in sound as well. So when
we haven't even really talked about music that much, have we?
No.
No, that's the thing. So what is going to end up happening, obviously, is I'm going to have to pick on him and, beg and ask kindly to have the LaunchableSocks join us again another time on another day, and we'll continue going into music. However, I'm going to leave you guys with a question that you are to answer. This question came from Avina, and I am going to tell you guys who has won the Gunnar Optic Glasses. Now, here's the thing. If this person does the same altruistic thing that was done by our first winner, I will re-roll and find a winner. So, the question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to have you each answer, including myself, so I'm not leaving myself out of this, is what game, in your opinion, had the best sound effects and soundtrack? Now, I'm going to let you think on that. The person who is going to get their hands on these Gunnar Optic lovely fire orange red interceptors is Zumba Pop.
I was hoping you would avoid that question. I saw it in chat earlier. I was going to raise it, and I was like, oh, God, that's such a hard one.
I know, but I'm
It's
going to
one
let
that
you
can
guys
be
think about
confident.
this. Just take yourself some time and little think about this. I just want to make certain that Zumba Pump's paying attention and that Zumba Pump really wants the glasses, because if not, I will roll again for somebody else. So Zumba, if you are interested, your name is what popped up in my random roller. And he says, hey, thanks. So congratulations, Zumba. Yay, someone who will use the glasses. But yes, all right. So let's start off with our sound friend here. Joost, tell us, has there been a game that has, and you feel free to, if you want to, completely blag your own. There's nothing wrong with that. But is there a game that had the best combination of sound effects and music, the whole thing combined together to create the experience for you when it came to sound?
Oh wow, that is a very difficult question.
It
Because
is.
there's so many games. There's so many games out there, and Sound and Music. Candy Crush. Did you say Candy Crush? Oh wow. Well, strangely enough, one of the games that I really love the audio of is Battlefield 3, which may be a strange game to name here, it being so, AAA. But it has incredible audio. But it has no real soundtrack, no real music. So I guess you could say that's out. But I do have to say I love the audio of that. It's just really well done. Some really good soundtracks. So I really like the Dust Force soundtrack. Of course, the Fez soundtrack. I've mentioned Limbo. I think Limbo uses sound and combines sound and music and kind of intertwines them very well to create a really just a flow that kind of grabs you right from the beginning and doesn't really let you go. And you kind of don't even concentrate on whether you're listening to sound or to music. It just all flows together and it just pulls you into that world. One thing I do think I have to mention is something that's influenced me a lot from the start is, I don't know, not exactly sure how to pronounce it. It's either Knit or Knit or something by Niflas. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
No.
No.
But it's a tiny little indie game. Niflas made more games like Saira, Night Sky, Knit Underground. Those are some bigger titles. I think some of them at least you can find on Steam. But he started out, I think, well, he probably did some smaller project before, but one of his first titles was Knit. It was just this tiny little game, it's a tiny little platformer about a little guy just crashed his UFO somewhere on a planet, and all you have to do is explore the planet and find the pieces back. But it's just pixely art style mixed with really kind of high definition sounds and ambience. A lot of attention to ambience mixed in with like little nuggets of music. Like you'd walk into this screen and see just a scene, like maybe somebody's sitting there fishing or something. It's nothing big happens, but then you get this kind of like 10-second clip or 20-second clip of sound, and it's just placed so well. It's really well done. So I can definitely recommend you look into that. It's a small game. You can play it in maybe 20 minutes or something, or maybe a little bit longer. But I think that's a game that does it really well.
Okay.
If that answers your question.
It does answer the question. What about you, Spiky?
Well, I've just been looking through my game music list because I love music of all sorts. But my favourite type of soundtrack, that's the only way I can really define any kind of favourite, is one that takes a theme and then runs with it and uses that theme recurringly in different ways. And specifically, I'm going to point at the Gears of War series and the Metal Gear Solid series, Metal Gear Solid being one of my favourite games, as you're well aware of by now. But the fact that they've got a main theme and then that keeps coming back in many different ways, and it's used to great effect when it comes to your the emotion as well within the particular the movie scenes, the movie secret, the cut scenes, etc. There's also, I mean, there's so many indie games. I mean, Thomas Was Alone. The soundtrack on that is beautiful. It's beautiful to play it and to experience literally hardly anything when it comes to the visual side, but the music itself and the voiceover gives it. It makes that game.
It's all procedure generated and reactive as well. You don't really realise, but we actually voted. I was one of the BAFTA judges that year, and we voted that one for best soundtrack.
Right. So what do you mean? What did the soundtrack is procedurally generated?
Soundtrack is procedurally generated depending on what's going on. It's all linked, and you jump, and then little sparkly bits come in and all sorts of stuff. You don't notice it. It's so well.
But there's also one other game that. Sorry, go on.
Well, Fez does that too. I think there's an hour-long talk by Disaster Piece, who did the soundtrack for Fez, who explains how they did that and how they used procedural generating to create the music in the game. And one example he had was where there was a thunderstorm in a level, and it was actually worked into the music. So every time you saw like a lightning flash, the music would get this. You hear this music stab, and it would trail off. With these glitchy sounds that would like represent the rain and things like that. And so that's really cool.
That really interests me, that kind of thing, though. But it's unfortunately more work for an indie dev again. You know, if you've got the time for it, go for it.
Yeah,
but...
so that more work, but it pays off. You should look it up on YouTube. I think if you Google something like Fez soundtrack, maybe like it was something about philosophy of music design or something in game, something like that. I'm going
to give 2 more indie games props before I go for the music. One is Mutant Mudds. I don't know if you've heard of that game. It's a side-scroller, 2D kind of platformer. To be fair, the game itself, I don't rate that much. It's been done and done and done, but it does have an interesting mechanic where you can go into the background and the foreground when you get to certain portals. But the music for it, every time it comes on my playlist, I'm like, what is this game? I've got to play it. And I played it, and you know, it's a brilliant soundtrack. The other one is Gunpoint, because Gunpoint, again, it's a 2D kind of stealth espionage 'em up. Really, really well done, nice art style, but the music itself it's a sleuth type music, dun 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 dun, you know, that kind of thing. It's like it feels really cool. Yeah, and when you go into wiring mode, or when you go into rewire mode, which is, I think you press tab or something like that, the music stays the same, but it's muted, and it's a lot more dulled down, and I love that. Again, that gave me a kind of, that's really cool, you know, and it just the music continues, and also the composer of that soundtrack is my composer on my game, so I thought I'd get that in there.
I see. Okay, so what about you then, Adam?
Well, I'll have to agree with Joost on the Battlefield 3 audio it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. That's because it's done by Ben Minto, who was the guy I worked with in all the Burnout games in Black, and we developed the sound mixer for that, which was incredibly difficult, and we spent 7 years on that sound mixer, and when then because that was an EA company, and then that went into Battlefield 3, so it is very, very good. I would say, and this is my own game, Burnout 2 is probably the best to me. Interactive music, reactive stuff. We squeezed an incredible amount of the PS2. Just so you know, just to compare, we had 74 seconds of audio in Burnout 2. That's all we had. And music, but 74 seconds. That's all we had to play with. It's all we could get out of the PS2's memory, and we made it sing. So.
Oh, okay. That actually, one last game to give props to, and I'm going to say the Grand Theft Auto thing, only because they do music differently, because you choose the music and it's appropriate and apt for that particular type of game. Again, it's a clever design choice.
The radio DJs have to get mad props for things like that as well. I'm just going to throw that out there. Yeah. All right, so you guys have had your piece now for a couple of mine. Someone wanted us to in particular, Apollonian wanted us to stick specifically with MMOs. If you have an MMO soundtrack that you think is the very best one, by all means, feel free to spit it out. But here are my game choices. To start off with, I have to state the one game of recent years that has tickled me pink with not just the sound effects, the ambience, but also the soundtrack itself is Transistor. Because of the fact that this is a game that has 2 versions of like every single song. One with humming, one without humming. One that has a slightly modified, and it drops the tone and the pitch just enough because it's a very twisted version of an original song. And then, of course, the sounds that are made by each time you activate an ability. Every time that you find yourself, in my case, kicking a beach ball, or the little dog named Luna that's kicking a beach ball with me, and the sound of the blades and everything, even the sounds of the monsters themselves, everything seems to be so perfectly intertwined. And it's just one of those things that I didn't expect, and it blew me away. But that's one. I have to agree with the Grand Theft Auto thing, but I want to throw out Bloodlines. VTM Bloodlines. For those of you who are unaware of it, it's Vampire the Masquerade. It's a very old school game. But it's basically an RPG, and you play a vampire and you run around. To this day, regardless of how many zombie games I play, regardless of how many quote-unquote horror games I play, there is nothing more terrifying to me than the sound of a schlachka running in a sewer.
Is that a Jewish thing?
No, no. Schlachkas
Oh no! It sounds like a Jewish word. There's a schlachka coming.
The schlachkas in this, the way they're visualized is they're basically a body or just a head and arms coming out of the head, and they move around. Now, this is supposed to be a horror type game, but all you hear is the sound of the feet pitter-pattering, which is technically their hands running around, and you just hear this panting. And it gets louder and louder the closer they get to you. And it's just this very subtle panting sound. And to this day, it is the most terrifying sound to me. And because of that, and it sticks with me.
That sound a little bit more for me?
No, please
no,
don't.
Thank you.
Oh, please.
You got it, and that's all you're getting. But because of that, it's terrifying. And it's just because of the fact that it stuck with me. Even the sounds of the abilities being activated, the music score itself was pretty exceptional too. All of it combined, but just that one thing has, to this day, stuck with me. Out of all of the games, I could mention Final Fantasies.
Yeah.
Everyone can recognize that. But that panting, subtle pitter-patter, knowing full well these things could kill you, to this day still makes my heart go.
I have the same.
We were talking about, you have to put your love and yourself into your sound, and I think that very often it results in things that are just slightly different. And whether it's you're making something nice and atmospheric or creepy and horror-like, if you have something that's slightly different, that's what's going to stick with people.
Absolutely. And on that note, that leaves me to say to all of you guys, thank you so much for joining. Joost, we are going to have you back, sir. For those of you who are interested, do check out the Steam game. It is on Steam for you to get. It is known as Cube -1. I really can't wait to get my hands on it. For the three of you who got your hands on the keys, congratulations. I am very jealous of you. For you, by the way, Zumba Pup, congratulations on the Gunnar glasses. For my hosts, I will have you back next week, and I believe John from Digital Tribes is joining us. However, I can't decide, and I'm going to leave it in his hands to pick, as to whether we're going to be talking about doing instructional manuals and tutorials, or whether we're going to be talking about the PR side of things, considering the fact that Digital Tribe is an independent publisher. So, we'll see what John picks, but on that note, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much. For those of you who may have missed the show, don't worry. It'll be on YouTube over the weekend. And to all of you who have shown up with amazing amounts of questions, remember, if we did not tackle your question, just send it in to us at voice@MMOBuff.TV, and sooner or later it will be answered. That's how it works. So, do you have anything you'd like to say before we say goodbye to everybody?
No.
I like trains.
I'm happy.
Yes.
I like my guitar glasses.
Yes, you do.
We should see it. Come on, guitar glasses. Come on, show everyone before we go.
Okay, yes. No, you have to do it with the hat. You need the hat,
I can
too.
turn myself into the Dutch version of Slash if you... Oh, hang on, just 1 second.
The Dutch version of Slash. It's a musical show.
Yeah, wait.
Slash. Slash.
Oh, he pulls out the guitar. We've got the
Oh
hat.
dear.
He's got a hat, certainly.
Wow.
Right?
You need a cigarette hanging out your mouth.
Yes, I'm about to say you need something hanging out your mouth.
And lots of pits on your face.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
amazing.
Slash, if you're watching. Love you.
Yeah, by the way,
You're
Slash,
watching.
if you're watching, love you. Come do music for my game. Awesome. So on that note, that is all of us here at the Datamine. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, we are here every single Thursday at 1 o'clock. We only missed 1 week, and that is because I got myself stupid ill. But we'll be back next week at 1 p.m. to discuss all kinds of amazing things, including a yawning Chris, who we've just completely bored out of his tears. So,
Past his bedtime.
It is past his bedtime. For you, Facing 10, I am expecting to speak with you a little later today. And for the rest of you, thank you so much for coming. This is Pseudo. I've been got major props to everybody who's been here today, and I will see many of you guys tomorrow night for Cosmotronic. We have things to give away. Bye-bye.
Tonight?
Friday night.
Oh, love you all.
Yes. Peace, peace.